Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Pete versus Anxiety. My guest today is an intuitive coach, psychedelic facilitator, motivated, and fascinated by the intersections of conscious and expansion with personal growth. Please welcome in the one, the only Chelsea Goucher. How are you doing today, Chelsea?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Doing great. Chelsea, why don't you tell everybody a little more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I live in Tennessee now. I was born and raised in Alaska, where I spent most of my life. I have a pretty diverse background. I spent a lot of my 20s doing sales, corporate sales, radio sales. And for the last 7, 8 years or so, I've really been kind of on a entrepreneurial journey turned spiritual journey turned spiritual awakening. And here I am.
Thanks. Right. Well, first off, Alaska. Jesus, man. Like, what?
It's an
People live
amazing
there?
place to grow up, you know?
Amazing girl. It's got to be colder than most people's refrigerators there. Are you kidding me?
Well, I'm from Southeast Alaska. So if you can visualize like the islands off British
Yeah.
Columbia, that's the part of Alaska I'm in. So a
Okay.
lot more temperate, lots of rain. It's a temperate rainforest. So a ton of rain, but mountains, big trees, whales, bears, very beautiful.
Okay, okay. Yeah, okay, I get that, I
Yeah.
get that. Okay, so what got you to being where you're at now, like a psychedelic facilitator? I know I've had somebody on with psychedelics before. Is it like you doing the whole figure out the microdosing? Am I now on the right lines along that?
Can you repeat that last part?
Okay, so my question for you is psychedelic facilitator. What is that exactly? Is that like the people that do the microdosing kind of thing?
Yeah. So as a facilitator, I've gone through an extensive 7 month training to get certified as a facilitator. And I also have, my own experience and kind of like my own body of work with psychedelics over the course of my life. It's kind of been something that's woven in and out of my personal path. And really the job of a facilitator is to hold space. Psychedelics, I work particularly with psilocybin mushrooms, but psychedelics, they open your brain up in ways that other substances don't. They're very unique. They're drugs, but I would argue that drugs come in all shapes and sizes. Some have positive impacts and some obviously have very negative impacts. But as a psychedelic facilitator, really what my job entails is just holding space because psychedelics are magical. What they do, science is starting to explain, but it really is a magical process and unique. And so, something that I learned from my teacher in the certification process was really like the psychedelics, the mushrooms have it all on their own. Someone can take mushrooms for the first time by themselves with no knowledge of what they're getting themselves into and have an earth shattering experience. They could also take them and have a horrible experience. They could also take them and have a disappointing experience and think that they're going to, see God or something and nothing happens. And so, kind of the way we speak about it in the circles that I'm a part of are that the psychedelics have it. They're the ones with the magic. They're doing their job. They're working on an individual's consciousness in whatever way they're doing. And as a facilitator, your job is really just to be there, to be that human element that supports. In my work with clients, mostly right now, I do one-to-one work. So I, facilitate the ingestion of the substance along with them. And I'm basically there to be a safe space, a container, someone they can talk to, someone to lead them through the process if things start to get scary or go awry. You know, Something really important to my training too is like set and setting. I'm sure you heard that from
Mm-hmm.
the people back in the 60s really realizing that set and setting are hugely important. And even in the more like clinical aspects of psychedelics that are really coming online, that's something that people are, really paying a lot of attention to and working with also is making sure that when people come into these situations, they're in a beautiful space, they feel safe, and that they kind of have some guidelines about how to navigate things if it does start to get weird or scary.
Yeah, yeah. I've had a guest on before. She dealt with psychedelics too. I think she said where the heck was she? Somewhere in the European area. I can't remember exactly where she was from. I think like Finland or something like that. She was telling us a little bit
Okay.
about the same idea, but she did a lot of work here in the US as well, she said. And it basically had facilitators set up in different areas, kind of like yourself, that would
Mhm.
do these kind of things. So a lot of that stuff is not new to me at all, but I like the idea of using mushrooms because it's more of a natural thing versus a lot of
Yeah.
these pharmaceuticals with all these other crazy effects they start adding in. And it's just like, oh god, if you sit there and watch some of these commercials nowadays, they're so deceiving because it's like all the bright colors are popping up, and then all of a sudden that low tone voice comes in. Oh, some side effects you may extreme, and they just start listing off things that you couldn't even imagine. You're like, wait, what? Hold on.
Yeah. I mean, I could go down a whole rabbit hole on, like, my opinions on, like, the pharmaceutical industry,
Oh
but
man.
I'll spare your listeners.
She's
I'm
like,
sure they could imagine. But I
oh
do. I mean,
yeah,
I think, obviously, like I said, psychedelics, I mean, they're a class of drugs.
yeah,
Drugs have a negative connotation. Obviously, drugs can be great too. I mean, I
yeah.
think it's ridiculous to think at this point that some government entity is accurately, like, in charge of determining, like, what's good and bad for people. But,
It's also something
I do.
natural though, you know what I mean? It's something as natural as you're gonna get, you know what I mean, kind of thing. It's not like something that's been processed over time and all these other things added in there, you know what I mean? You're getting basically the bare bones essentials of it though.
Absolutely. I mean, a really great book to read is like Food of the Gods and Terrence McKenna. And it really goes into how, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that psilocybin specifically and all kinds of different psychoactive sacraments have been used
Yeah.
like throughout human history and that we've really kind of co-evolved along with these substances. So while I wouldn't like just say, anything natural is good, I think
Yeah.
there's
Oh no,
like
I get you
a
there.
little bit of truth in that. I think that it's a lot better, and I think that, I just think that the effects of psychedelics can be so powerful on how they act on the brain specifically and help people open up their point of view and their way of looking at things in a way that sometimes can be almost impossible for people that are so deeply entrenched in, like, the thought patterns that they've been swimming in their entire life. So I think it is pretty amazing. And there can be negative effects with psychedelics, but a lot of them are, often with people that shouldn't really be taking them in the first place, people that already have like a weak ego construct, or people that like have like a legitimate, physical like contraindication, like people that are on SSRIs, for example,
Yeah.
should not take psychedelics until they've weaned themselves off the SSRIs because you can have like a serotonin dump experience, which can be bad. Other than that, I mean, most of the, even a bad trip, it's mostly in the mind. And really, coming back to the job as a facilitator, part of the job is to help someone navigate that and be like, okay, what are these fears? What is this scary thing? What is this trying to tell you? What does moving towards this fear have for you in the way of your own development, your own growth? Like, what can you learn from this experience? So, even things that could seem negative, I think have in the long run a positive value, just like any other life experience. You're going to learn from the good and the bad.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of life experience, what's a little bit about your background? I know I didn't list some of it that you have that you sent me over. I know that you had it says addiction, codependency, and people pleasing. And I know people pleasing is a big one that's come up recently for me a lot of
Yeah.
times with people too. So I find it very interesting. So do you want to touch on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I tend to be a little long-winded, but I'll kind of give you like the quick rundown of the life of Chelsea in a nutshell. I've always been like, when I say people pleaser, like I've always been really good at like knowing what the people in authority wanted and like how to give it to them. And
Yeah.
so I was like a straight A student in school. I genuinely loved learning. So like, it was easy for me to like it was always easy for me to get along with authority because I felt like it was aligned with me, like usually what they wanted out of me. I wanted to do my best. So I was like class president and salutatorian. And, I was a big high achiever in high school. But I didn't have a lot of direction. I thought maybe for a while that I wanted to be a lawyer because I wanted to get into politics. And I ended up going to college and feeling pretty lost about what I was actually going to do with my life and not feeling inspired at all. I mean, deep down, I'd always wanted to be a performer. I'd done ballet and stuff all growing up. So I really wanted, like, my goal was to, like, go to Hollywood and be an actress. That's what I really wanted deep down. But of course, that wasn't like, obviously a straight A student. Like, you need to go to college and get a degree and all that stuff. And so in college, I ended up finding a lot of solace in my boyfriend at the time. And he'd had some struggles with addiction with like Oxycontin when like the prescription drug problem was really becoming a thing for a lot of young people in this country. And he and I ended up getting into heroin together. And so I spent 3 years addicted to heroin and then methamphetamine. I ended up dropping out of college. I ended up actually spending 8 months in jail, and that probably, like, saved my life. 8 months was enough to get me clean, get my head back on right. That when I got out of jail, I was able to be like, "You know what? Like, maybe there's more for me than this, like, criminal life I've been living for the last 3 years that I'd, like, taken on." I mean, I totally get when they say, like, people become gang members and it's like family. It's like, that's how I felt. I felt like these people were my friends, and I felt like they were the only people that really understood me and understood, like, how boring and how uninspiring, like, regular societal life felt to me.
Hmm.
So I got out though and, like, ended up getting a job, getting my own place, and, like, before I knew it, I was, like, back on the ground running. I'd gotten a job. I was in a small town in Alaska, like I said, so a lot of people were willing to give me a second chance, which I'm very grateful for. And so pretty soon I got like a radio sales job, and then I was working for the Chamber of Commerce, and then I got into corporate sales, and I just like kind of my life was coming back together. I was engaged, I'd bought a house, like I was checking all the boxes. I was redeemed, you know what I mean? That's how I felt. But then I also like was just feeling like it still wasn't it. I still was just feeling I constantly worried about what people thought of me. I was constantly worrying that I wasn't good enough. Like, I just felt like I was constantly trying to prove myself, you know? And I had a lot of questions about myself too. Like, how could I have gotten into drugs? Like, it seemed like kind of an anomaly. Like, I was this person, and then I was this other person, and now I was back to like version one of myself. And none of it was really adding up. And so I started to kind of start digging into myself. And then 2020 happened. And then I had a lot of time to dig into myself and a lot of other things. And I think what happened for me most poignantly that year is that my identity that I'd taken on as like the good girl, the person that always like is in line with authority, with the law of the land, with whatever you want to call it, like that identity like got shattered completely because I felt so disconnected from like the narrative. And even, people in my community, older people I looked up to, people that I'd been in different, community service organizations and Rotary clubs and all these things with, like, I just suddenly was, like, not in agreement with a lot of them on a lot of these issues that 2020 brought up, and I was like, "Well, who am I then if I'm not, like, the good girl? Who am I if I'm the person, like, that all of a sudden people are, like, yelling at on Facebook for saying something?" And it kinda put me into, like, this first, like, dark night of the soul type thing where I shut down. I felt like I didn't wanna talk to anyone, I didn't wanna share my opinions anymore. I felt so unsafe? But it also gave me a lot of time to, like, kind of really realize that I was having a spiritual awakening, like, having a full-blown, like, just getting these downloads. And I'm not, like, or I don't hear or see things, but I just, like, I get these, like, downloads where I just, like, know things. And so I was
Yeah.
getting these downloads about, like, scripture, and, like, I didn't grow up Christian, like, just crazy stuff. It sounds crazy, but, like, for me, it was a spiritual awakening, and I started working with a couple different coaches, and pretty soon I was like, "This is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I need to help other people get through whatever the hell's happening for me." And so I started to, like I said, learn different modalities. I got
Yeah.
my coaching certification, and then the psychedelics thing just it kind of I connected with someone online. I loved her energy, and psychedelics hadn't necessarily been something I was like looking to integrate into my tool set for working with clients. But quickly after talking to her, I was like, I think that there's something to this. And I'd had, like I said, my own personal experience with psychedelics and knew how powerful they could be. So I was like, yeah, let's take this seriously and see if it's something that I can put in my tool belt and make available to people that, are looking to expand their consciousness and come to understand the world maybe a little bit differently than the very black and white way that most of us understand it, and that can lead us feeling hopeless, depressed, anxious.
Yeah.
all of these things that I'm sure you're very familiar with.
Yeah, definitely. I have depression and anxiety really bad. It just depends on what the day is like for me. Some days it's like
Yeah.
I'm okay, but other days it's like I just don't want to do anything else. I get up, do this podcast, record, and I go right back into that depressive mode, And I love hearing your story because it's like you're on this journey of self-discovery basically is what it seems like. It's like
Yeah.
you were like this one person and now you're a whole different person. And I get through the same thing too with this show in the beginning. If anybody that hasn't listened to the early episodes, if you listen to them, you'll notice the way the interviews change as we go because it's like I start learning new things as I go. I start meeting new people, I get a little different perspective, and then I start picking up things from the people. Like energy was a big one when I met one woman. They called herself the Energy Alchemist. Me and her had this hour-long conversation, just deep into. I was just like, dude, okay, this makes sense because I had that same thing. I couldn't explain, almost like you were having those downloads. It was like it's just weird things that were going on. I couldn't explain around me. Like I'm energy sensitive, so I could feel people's energy. And I could never
Yeah.
explain this feeling, It's like, what the hell is this feeling? Like, what is this? And I started explaining it to her, and she's like, well, that's because you're energy sensitive. I said, "Oh, okay, now it makes a little more sense, because now when she broke it down for you, and I was like, I had this weird feeling, like, and I was explaining it to her, and it's been interesting though, because I've had some interviews where like people had the spiritual connection too, and she just called this one, the one when I met, she had this entity called Spirit, and like if you're watching the episode, like right in the middle of it when she starts reading something to me, I just go completely just like dead stare. And, like, afterwards, I just start going off, like, I just started going off, like, I just had a sugar rush just hit, but it was like, it's so hard to explain what was going on because, like, you can see I go blank, and I'm like, in that moment, nothing else exists. Whatever she's saying just matters. That's it. Like, the air conditioning could be running above my head. I couldn't even hear that. And everything just went completely silent except for what she was saying.
Yeah.
And it's so I feel that 100%. Like, I love hearing that too. And people's stories are like that, similar to mine, because it's just like, whoa, okay, how do you explain this feeling now? Now this is something new I got to go explore. What is that? And I love it
Right.
too when people bring other things to the table, because then I'm like, well, now I got to go explore this thing now. New rabbit hole to go down.
It is. It feels like being a detective and like it's like following the trail of breadcrumbs because I feel like as humans, we do have so much knowledge within
Yeah.
us, within our lineages, within our memories. And we're like taught to not really take it seriously. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like we're taught to look outside of ourselves constantly for authority and knowledge. And well, that's all fine and dandy. It's like a sliver, and what is authority anyway? It's so interesting. It really has been a unique journey. And I feel like, what I do is more important than ever because I feel like, the way things have unfolded, over the last 5 years, and especially this year, I feel like it's like more people are going through this reckoning
Yeah.
of like who they really are and what human life is really about. And it's just like a fascinating time to be alive. Sometimes stressful and sometimes disheartening, but I think overall fascinating and I'm hopeful.
Right. Exactly. No, I agree. I think it's more that people are starting to start to worry more about themselves, and I think COVID's what really brought it forward for a lot of people's, mental health issues and things. When that stuff started coming to the forefront, it was like, oh God, what is this feeling? Now I have to discover what this problem is, and then, everybody just hears therapy, 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 and they're like, oh, I don't like therapy. Therapy's terrible because people just give you drugs and they'll just try and dope you up on things, and I think that's what really scared a lot of people about talking about their problems because like when you get into like suicide ideation, man, people start freaking out, like going nuts. Like I had an episode where somebody here on the show was talking about his thoughts, and he's like, "Yeah, this morning I thought about killing myself," and I was like, "Oh God!" And in my mind, I'm freaking out, going, "Oh God, what is he saying right now?" And he's just going into his complete conversation. And after the episode had aired, I had like 15 emails of people going, "Oh my God, what happened? Is he okay? Is he all right?" I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, he's fine. Things you learn, you like learn things like that. You're like, okay, well, at the time, you don't realize what's going on, but then you learn that, in fact, that he's talking to you is better than him not saying anything at all. Because mind you, I know a little bit about mental health when I started this thing. This is more of a self-discovery journey for me to learn more things about it because I had my own issues. I'm like, I wonder what other people have issues and who's talking about these things, And I
Yeah.
found that a lot of them are doctors, which it's don't get me wrong, doctors are great, they're really cool people. I've met a lot of doctors come on the show, but it's like we're the regular people just exploring this topic alone and just bringing people into this space that are doing other things, like what you're doing and other people are doing. You know what I mean? And it gets so fascinating because when you start adding more voices to the whole conversation, the conversation just gets real weird. But it's okay. Like it's like that good weird. It's not like, oh my God, somebody just brought crystal meth cupcakes to the party kind of thing. It's like, hey, all right, cool, I like this. We got another personality here. So now mix it up the conversation a slight bit as you go.
And I think that's so important because I think, again, like we oftentimes like are taught and are learned to see the world in a way where it's like we have all the answers, like the questions have been answered and like they really haven't. Or they've been answered, but like with an ulterior motive or for some other reason that isn't really like the best answer. And
Or
so
we're not
I
happy with the answer we get to. Think about it, because a lot of times people make reference to your parents, but it's like your parents are parents for the first time. They haven't been parents before. So like these things you're asking them, it's like you can't get mad at them when they give you the wrong answer because they don't even know themselves what the answer is. You know what I'm saying? It just blows people's
totally,
minds. They're like, what?
totally. I mean, and the way I feel, when it comes to things like anxiety and depression, I did reference that like, I experience a lot more anxiety
Yeah.
when I was younger. My personal opinion is that all emotions are information. They're our minds and our bodies like telling us something, giving us information that we should listen to and act on. And I think it's completely rational and logical that in a society so disconnected from like the way humans have evolved to eat, to work, to live, to cohabitate, that our minds and bodies would be like rebelling against us and giving us these symptoms, these anxieties, these
Yeah.
addictions, these depressions, like these things that our human spirit like screaming out, in my opinion, that something's got to give, that we can't be on this 40-hour work week treadmill, that we can't be inundated on this like diet of nonstop news and information, like all these different things that are just
Yeah, it's
you
almost like an
know
information overload. You're right. I feel like that too
yeah.
because now you have all these different apps and things that just keep throwing shit at you. And like TikTok's very addictive. You get in that endless doom cycle and you start looking through this and then the weirder shit that they start sending you. And it's so predatory if you think about it because they're targeting you because the algorithm is playing off what you're watching. And it's like, okay, well, you like this. Let me feed you a little more of this and see how much longer I can get you to be addicted to this thing. And I think when people think of addiction, they always think drugs. And I'm like, no, it's much bigger than that. Like there's a
It's
lot more other things
everything.
addictions. Yeah, exactly. You get
Everything. I
addicted
mean,
to
again,
anything.
like our brains want to feel good. And so searching for dopamine, serotonin, like all these things, it's like our brain is a tool of consciousness, but it's not consciousness. And I think we forget sometimes how our brains can be like hijacked by those like dopamine, the serotonin,
Yeah.
the endorphins, like all of these different things that feel good. Again, in modern society, those circuits aren't running the way they have evolutionarily for, tens of thousands of years for humans. And so it's easy for our brains to get hijacked. And then also because we identify so much with our brains and our egos, it's like then when we feel hijacked, it's like, oh, that's our entire identity now. Like that was one thing that, when I got out of jail, I did AA and NA for a while, like traditional 12-step programs, and they were
Yeah.
super helpful. And I do feel like they were helpful for me in the sense that they kind of first introduced me to like the idea of God. Of course, they call it, I'm forgetting what they call it now, like your higher power, whatever it is, whether it's like
Yeah.
you, the group, whatever. And I feel like that was super helpful for me. But as I went along with my sobriety, what ended up not being helpful for me was like identifying as an addict. I was like, I'm not an addict. I was addicted. My brain has addictive tendencies because that's how the brain operates. Like biologically, that's how it works. But like, I am not an addict. And so that's something that I really like, even when I hear someone say, like, I have anxiety or I have depression, it's just something I have to live with.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe, or maybe it's just a symptom of something that's happening for you right now. And there's actually more to you that if you're able to come in touch with that part of yourself and remember that part of yourself, you'll realize that there is like a deeper, there's so much more to you than that
Yeah.
part of your brain that's like just like the rat hitting like the cocaine water or whatever
Yeah.
in the cage. You know
That
what
what
I
is it
mean?
now? The proverbial lizard thing now. My wife sent me that fucking video with the lizard. I'm like, oh my God, now I can't stop hearing lizard, lizard. I'm like, I swear to
I
God,
don't
if you don't stop
know. I
playing
don't
that video,
know.
I'm gonna freak out, dude. It's like, stop playing this fucking video. But no, I get it though. It makes sense though. And I think a lot of times too, now with the internet, you have an information overload if you think about it, because you have everybody's an expert at everything. Oh shit, listen to me, listen to that. It's like, oh God, who would I listen to at this time? Because it's like all these people start filling your head with all this crap, and then it's like the stuff you need, it's like it gets diluted because all this other crap they keep throwing out there, and all these people are just saying all these big great things, and it's like, oh God, what do I believe at this point? Instead of asking the proper questions of like, okay, so what is your background, and see which people are actually fact from crap. But it's like you get so much thrown at you with all the different social media sites. It's like you got tons of attacks coming in for its way. It's just, it's an identity crisis for some people.
And I feel like an even more important question, I would argue, instead of like, what's this person's background? Like, most of the stuff I see on Instagram, it's like mostly other coaches, other spiritual people on a spiritual path. Like, that's what I'm interested in. And the fact of the matter is even in this like pretty curated algorithm that I have that's like mostly positive uplifting things, there is stuff in there that sometimes gives me heartburn. For example, when I see people that I admire that are spiritual leaders talk negatively about psychedelics or have a really dogmatic view of XYZ topic. And it does what it always does. It like, it triggers you. It makes you feel like, oh, am I wrong? Am I, on the wrong path or whatever? And I just feel like that is the ego. That is the ego trying to keep you caught in this like logical idea that we have of human society. There is somehow a right way or a wrong way to be a human and to know yourself and to know God or spirit, whatever you want to call it. And so to me, like the bigger question is not like, what is this person's authority or their background, but it's like, is what they're saying true for me? Because
Yeah.
I think that different things can be true for different people and still hold validity. I think you can be a completely conscious, wide awake person and never use psychedelics.
Yeah.
I also think they're a great tool. I think you can be a completely conscious, awakened person and be a Christian and read the Bible. I also think that you don't need to do that. I also think that you can find love and light in your own. I mean, you know what I mean? I think people of every religion, every dogma, every practice, it's like, some people are meat eaters and some people are vegetarians. And you know what? Like, we're all biologically different. So maybe there's a different right way for different people, and that we have
Yeah.
to find that ourselves. And so as like an intuitive coach, kind of like the broader overarching thing I do, I have psychedelics like within. It's really about guiding people back to listening to the small, still voice within themselves, because that is the voice of truth. That's the voice that you can trust. We're just not taught about that voice. We're not even really taught that it exists or that it's a real thing, but it absolutely is, because that is that part of you that when you see something and it resonates and you're like, that's truth, like that is that voice. And so really, as an intuitive coach, that's what I try to do, is like hone people's ability to connect with and stay in connection with that voice, because then even when they do get triggered and they see something that is against what they believe or that is not right for them, they can take it in with compassion and empathy and be like, okay, this person's walking a different path than me. And this is the conclusion they've come to. And they're probably speaking about it for a certain reason. And what they've decided is right for them doesn't have to make me feel right or wrong about myself unless I let it. And that, I think, is true power. I mean, I really do. I think that is true power, is being able to say, you know what, what's right for you might not be right for me. And that's okay, because I have enough trust and knowledge in myself that it doesn't matter what you think. I know what's good for me. I know what's right for me. I know what I need to do to take care of myself, and that's what I'm going to do. And I feel like, that's what the world needs rather than all of this like constantly looking to these battling authorities of who is like you know, the right person about whatever topic it happens to be. Obviously, and like facts matter, but so much of the human experience isn't about facts. It's
Yeah.
about how we feel, it's about how we experience the world, it's about what gives us satisfaction and fulfillment and joy. And treating that aspect of human life the same way as we treat like, just the information we have about the world around us, I think is like a huge disservice to people.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think you're right. It makes sense. I think that's what people are really looking for. But I feel like a lot of times they go with the sheep like mentality just because everybody else is doing it. Now I want to go do it too. Or what is it? FOMO, the fear of missing out, because they're like, oh God, I'm going to miss out on this. Instead of really focusing on, hey, does this really make sense to me? Or is this something I'm really in tune with? So many people just like to sit there and complain about shit and just like, it's so easy to swipe on though. Think about it. It's so easy just to pass over it. Okay, well, this isn't for me. Swipe on. What do? You skip it. Okay, cool. That's the great thing about technology now. You can just pass over it. If it's not something for you, okay, then tell it's not for you, Don't sit there and keep watching it because everybody else is watching it. It's always like that scenario, like it's a car crash. You want to look away, but you can't, but you choose not to. It's like, like just do the direct opposite, be the person for change, really. Think about it, kind of like do your own thing. And, so many times people call that like, oh, you're a hippie for doing your own thing. But I think they had it right, though. If you think about it, though, think about it. Like they were more free spirited. They were more natural in causes of things. They kind of just did whatever the flow, went in the flow, kind of did their own thing. And it's like people looked at them differently. But now it's like, wait a minute, maybe they were right about some things, maybe some of those things they were saying was true. You know what I mean? And I think, it just kind of depends what you get into. Like, just even with spirituality, it's just like, it's so fascinating the things that you could just learn just by just going on a journey of self-discovery, and I explore
Totally.
all things, I did a episode where we did my birth chart, because I really love astrology. So that was fun to do. We are actually going to explore human design is actually coming up soon too. That's another one we're going to
Eh,
do
That's
and things
very
like that too.
cool.
Because I'm like, it's going to be so cool because it's just like I'm going to experience it for myself, and other people get to watch it, so they're not so scared of what it is. And now there's a couple other things I have planned too, like different sessions with other people that do different things in certain areas, just to give people a feel for what it is. And then one person and I were talking about it, and she beat me to the punch. She's like, we should do an episode where we do a session. And we'll do a session with you, but people can watch you doing it. I'm like, yeah, why not? Let's go for it. I'm down for it. Why not? What do I have to lose at this point? You know what I mean? Like, what I may learn something, it may not be for me. Okay, well, it's not for me. Then that's cool too. Because I had somebody saying that too. They're like, well, if you don't like this, don't leave a negative review. I'm like, but I'd rather be honest with people. If it wasn't for me, I'll tell you it wasn't for me. I'm not going to hate on what you're doing, and so I'm like, I'm trying to think what it was. So it was like some really deep process. And she was like, um, I can't think of the name of this off the top of my head, but she was something quantum something. I can't remember what it was, like a quantum healing
Okay.
session. Like they go deep
Okay.
into your psychological, deep in your psyche kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that'd be so cool. But I haven't done it yet because there's a lot of requirements for that. But I haven't done it yet, but it's a plan to do that too as well. Things like that. And there's a couple other people that are going to do like the Ashwood. I keep messing the name of this thing, but the Ashwood record
Akashic
readings.
Records.
The Akashi
Yeah.
records. I can never get that word right, no matter how many times I say it. But yeah, we're gonna do something like that too. That's another plan for something else, And I found out though, like when I touched on a little bit of human design, I found I'm a man generator. So the fact that I'm trying to do 20,000 things at once may sound complex to people, but people that get it understand that me as a man generator, that's what I do, And then when I started studying my birth chart, it was like, well, my Aries moon is coming through, and people are just looking at me like, what the hell does that mean? You're about to find out. Don't worry. Hang on. Like it was so fascinating to learn that, like, public speaking was in my chart because it was like the 10,000 thing. I had a lot of activity in the 10,000, like spirituality, public speaking, and a few other things in there. Was just like I had a lot of activity in the 10th house for whatever reason. That's where everything was just going on. But it was so interesting because the woman that was doing it had no idea anything about me prior to this conversation. She knew who I was a little bit because the woman with the with spirit is actually somebody she worked close with. The two of them had actually linked up, and that's how I realized the two of them knew each other. And she's like, "Yeah, we were talking on the phone last night. I told her about your podcast, and she said, 'Oh yeah, I've been on the show and stuff like that too.'" And I was just laughing. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I get that a lot lately. A lot of people have either heard of my show or somebody's mentioned my name to them, or I've mentioned my name, or my name's been mentioned to them, kind of thing. And it's so fascinating though. But I like being an open book for people to see just like how these things go, and so it's kind of fun
Totally.
because at the same time people can see that, hey, listen, you don't have to be too worried about it. This is kind of interesting. You never know what you're going to find out about yourself as you go and things like that too. So,
It is. I mean, that's what it comes down to is there's so many different systems like over
mhm.
human history that have evolved to help us make sense of ourselves. Like, from a very psychological perspective, from these like archetypes that like exist within all of us. I don't know if you are familiar at all with like Carl Jung or his work. I
Yeah, I've
really
heard the name before.
love it's like astrology, human design, tarot.
Tarot's interesting and oracle cards are very interesting too. I've had
Yeah, and
experiences
they're
with those
they're
too.
similar to astrology in that they're this like archetypal mandala that helps us, understand the way like the energies weave together in the world and how everything is, there's nothing new under the sun. It's all the same story over and over again repeating, right? And even in our own lives, like we're all affected by the same energies, the same
Yeah.
passions, the same, we're human, like that we all are afflicted or gifted with the same, gods that move us. You know what I mean? Whether it's hatred or joy
Mhm.
or love or jealousy, it's like these things are all within us. And there's so many different systems, and I think there's so much confusion about them and fear, like what you said, because again, people clinging on to this idea of, oh, well, my system's more right than yours.
Yeah.
This is the definitive way of looking at things. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. We can keep what works for ourselves and leave the rest. If tarot or astrology don't work for you, then like don't pay attention to them. You know what I mean? Because there's plenty of other ways of
Right,
getting to know
exactly.
yourself that might work better for you. It's just and I think that's like the joy of the personal growth journey, of the spiritual awakening journey, of this journey of curiosity is that there's so many different paths that I believe lead to the same source. And I also think that that's why, historically, it's been so dangerous, is because in the interest of order and control, it's just easier if everyone thinks the same thing,
Mhm. Mhm. You're not wrong. I mean,
but
think
it's
about it.
not.
It's that sheep-like mentality. If we all believe the
Yes.
same
Yeah.
thing, and then you're like Aristotle, "Oh, hey, wait a minute. Everything doesn't revolve around the earth. It revolves around the sun." You're like, "Oh no. Oh, you're wrong. You're wrong because you have this outside idea of what they have all thought, for all this time." And it's just funny though, because it's like, you get these people that are so easily influenced to go follow these crazy ideas that they come up with, and then it's like one person, the next person, and things like that. And it's just like, do you listen to yourself sometimes? Like, honestly, like what you're saying, like, do you really believe this? And some people are just like, they give you that vibe where they're just going with the flow because they don't want to go against the grain because they're afraid that, they'll lose something in the end of it. Like, though friends won't be there. But, really, if you think about the energy principle, like, if they're not staying there, obviously they don't like the energy you're putting out and you don't like the energy they're giving off. And it's just natural. What happens, you'll attract the people you want around you. I think a lot of more people are having that more sense of adventure now. And they're like, oh, let's go for it versus, sticking with the old world mentality of, oh no, we need to do this. You need to go to school. You need to go to that. All these are things that we've been constantly told all our lives that we need to do or else we'll be wrong or the world will come to an
Right.
end because you're not doing this. It's like a lot of people are going against the grain and now they try to ostracize them because they're like, oh, well, I don't like, they don't want to work or they want to do this or, whatever excuse you come up with. It's all the same thing. You're basically in line. You're
Totally.
basically mad because they're the one that the other thought process versus everybody else.
Totally. I mean, and like I said, I mean, I experienced that myself in 2020 of feeling like totally like, oh my gosh, am I a bad person because I don't believe like what I'm supposed to believe or I'm
Yeah.
not on this side of this political viewpoint or whatever. And it's like, it's disheartening. And, when you grow up in a society where you're like rewarded for being good and following the rules, And then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, but I don't think these rules are like the right rules. It is scary. And, I did lose friends over it. I did people still that I was like very close to, and like our relationship has never been the same because they just saw me as a bad person for what I believed. And or maybe not a bad person, but ignorant somehow or uncaring, or I mean, there's all these different things, but at the end of the day, it's it's because we've been indoctrinated in these systems of, like I said, order and control that I think ultimately like work on like shame.
Hmm.
And no human likes to feel ashamed or guilty. No human wants to be the bad guy. You know what I mean? And so when you when your friend tells you, "Oh, you're inhumane or you don't care, you're not thinking about this right," it like triggers that response in us of like shame of like, "Oh no, maybe I am a bad person." And shame is such a dangerous place to be because that is where a lot of people, rather than feel that feeling and working through it and coming to establish themselves within like their own sense of what is right and wrong, would rather just not deal with it. And so they're going to toe whatever line they need to toe, whether they really believe it or not. And then you mix that in with like influence and power
Hmm.
and money and all these other things. It's like, of course, there's people that are just going along with it. And they probably don't believe half the things they're saying, but they have a great life and they're living in the material world, and that's what they're going to do because that's just the game that we're playing here on this earth. And I mean, you can't even really hold that against someone. That's just where their consciousness is at and the role they've chosen to play or been born to play. And so it's me, it really does come back to like finding that sense of self where you know right from wrong, and you can feel that even if someone is pointing a finger at you, that you can be like, I know I'm a good person. I know my heart is pure. I know that I'm coming at this for my reasons, even if these other people don't understand them. I understand myself, and being able to like let shame roll off your back. You know what I mean? Because shame is so unhealthy. And I think that guilt and shame at their root are like underneath a lot of depression and anxiety and addiction. It's like us, this voice in our head that's constantly like, you should be doing this.
Hmm.
You shouldn't have said that. The way you talk to this person, that was bad. What are they going to think of you? Oh, I didn't show up to work today, or I'm late. And now it's like this inner dialogue that's just constantly like
Yeah.
shame, 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 shaming us. And it's like, where does that come from? That's not natural. That's like how we've been bred as humans, I feel, is that voice is the voice of God. And I'm like, that's not the voice of God. That voice constantly telling you that you suck is not the voice of God. I can tell
Right.
you that right now.
Exactly. No,
And
you know
that's
what?
what
A
I
lot of
believe.
times it's the negative self-talk, and I did a whole episode
Yeah.
on that with somebody. We were discovering that, and she had a background in neuroscience, and it was very interesting to find out. She said that recently they discovered there's a part of your brain where that a lot of that talk would come from, though, and it actually generates from there. And we went into this hour-long conversation, and it was just so fascinating because like you didn't feel at any point in this conversation with her that like, you were lost because she kept it so they kept the lingo enough that you knew what was going on. And it's really good explaining things. So, but it was interesting. So I always tell people that though. I'm like, oh, we don't do that negative self talk here. Anytime anybody starts trying to like do that kind of like harping on themselves kind of thing. So it's like I'm my harshest critic. Like I get on my own ass about a lot of things. Like I get on myself and that thoughts start going like that. And when my anxiety takes it and goes, okay, let's go overdrive time. So we're going 1,000 miles an hour instead, and it's funny when, people that don't get it, they try to tell you to like, oh, you just need to relax or you need to calm down. It's like, yeah, I wish really that's what it's like. It's like, if you took a car battery, it just jumped somebody. Yeah, that's what you're trying to stop. It's just not working right now. You're not, whatever you're saying to me is not getting through. I hope you're breaking news to you. Or they come in and they get too excited and then they start getting you more excited and they're like, I'm feeding off your energy currently. Like I'm having a freak out or something, like, or you start having like a panic attack. And people come here, oh, you just need to calm down. And it's like, no, please stop talking. You just want to tell them to shut up, but you can't because it's your boss or somebody else. Because I've had a freak out session when I was at work before, and my boss kept coming up to me, and she just started ramping up even more and just kept saying things, and I'm just like, I just wish you'd go the fuck away, honestly. Please leave me alone. But you can't tell that to your boss. You're like, you're thinking this, and you're like, yeah, And it's so funny though, it's because one of the other guys I work with, he understood what was going on, and he was just standing there. Well, just standing there watching me, just going complete nuts. And he's just like, all right, it's okay. You're good. And he's just so soft and mellow about it. And then she kept coming back and trying to feel the fire more. And I was just like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I wish she'd go away too. But
Right.
some people get it and some people don't get it. But you can see though, and it's a generational thing too, if you think about it, because a lot of the old generation was always taught, that, oh, you're just got to suck it up or whatever, all these other things. But now this newer generation is more in tuned a little bit more. And I think that's what scares a lot of them, is the fact that a lot of them are more, they're going against that grain of that mentality that they were pre-programmed with. Well, you can't have feelings, or you can't talk about your issues and things like this. And the whole defining of roles. If all that shit we can get into for another hour at least about crap. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, it's
Because
so crazy
it's all
though.
programming. It's all
Mm-hmm.
programming to keep us, like, bringing it back to, like, what you said about my bio, like, of, like, it's consciousness. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And, like, that's the thing, is, like, that's what I think can help anyone start, like, really just being aware, is, like, you're at this level of awareness where, like, you can be in this interaction with your boss and, like, see it for what it is, where she's
Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jesus. Yeah. God, no. Right. No, I agree. I agree 100% with you there. I love the encyclopedia reference for all the younger kids who don't know what those are. Those were books where we had used. We didn't have the internet. Okay, that shit didn't exist, bro. We had, what was it? Because AOL was our first internet experience. Like, those chat rooms and all other shit. It's like, oh god, it was that you got mail was the big thing you always heard it say, like, you got mail, and you're all excited about it. But yeah, I think it's like you said, there's good and there's bad when it comes with all the information at your fingertips. For the love of God, please stop WebMDing your symptoms. You don't have cancer unless you actually go see a doctor that could tell you that. I don't know how many times I got to tell you that. Wikipedia isn't real. It's just factual for most of the things on there. I mean, I could go for this for hours on this thing, but it's just like, well, with that being said, we're getting ready to start wrapping up, though. Chelsea, I have 2 questions for you. I ask all my guests the same questions, okay? So the first one is credit to a good friend of mine. She has a podcast that's called The Shit That Goes On in Our Heads, okay? So the question is to you, is that if your mental health had a song, what would that song be? If your mental health had a song, what would that song be? That's a very good question from a lot of people. A lot of people are like, damn, that's really good. I'm like, this is fun to hear the answers to this. There you go. Yeah, see, we have a lot of interesting ones. It's so interesting because people, that's what they go to. They're like, I'm going to go with the first thing that popped in my head. I'm like, go for it. You just want to give into it because it's so interesting to hear people's responses to things. We've had a 49-year-old Middle Eastern woman tell me Beat It by Michael Jackson was her mental health song. I damn near died when she said that. I was like, get it, girl. Come on now. Let's go. So there's another question I ask everybody. And the whole reason this podcast exists is if you could break the stigma about mental health. I mean, anything you hear out there that you're just like, if you don't stop, I'm going to come to this computer and hit the slap button on you. What would it be? Exactly. I love it. And with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. Chelsea, thanks so much for being here. But did you want to plug where everybody can find you? Your Facebook, website, anything you got that you think is the best way for them to come find you? And with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. You guys know where to find me. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety and X all the way down to TikTok. I'm on Spotify all the way down to iHeartRadio. And as I always say, it costs nothing, absolutely nothing to be kind to somebody. One kind act you could do could save someone's life, or hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety signing off saying, don't ask how your day is today. Say, hey, how's your mental health today? So bad, everything's wrong, you're breaking my neck. It's a sign of respect, there's an eye for death. But never die for the price of a check. I got my integrity and my word. I'd rather die than death and burn. My respect you'll have to earn, but I don't think I wait my